In 1971, a locksmith from Baguio City named Rogelio Roxas found something buried in a tunnel beneath the mountains of Benguet that would eventually cost him everything he had. Not just his money, not just his freedom, everything. His health, his safety, his future. The years of his life that should have belonged to him and didn't because of what he pulled out of the ground that night. And here is the first thing you need to understand about Rogelio Roxas. He was not a thief. He was not a reckless man chasing shadows. He had a government-issued permit to dig. He had done his research. He had followed every single rule. He did everything correctly and by the book. And when his flashlight hit that gold, when the beam landed on a solid Buddha statue cast in pure yellow metal sitting in a tunnel beneath the Philippine mountains, he believed, reasonably, logically, understandably, that his life was about to change for the better. At 2 in the morning on January 25, 1971, armed men in red fatigues kicked down the door of Rogelio Roxas's home. They were not burglars. They were not random criminals who had heard a rumor and gotten lucky. They were organized, they were informed, and they knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where it was. They took the golden Buddha statue. They took the gold bars Roxas had already removed from the tunnel. And then they took Roxas himself, to a place where no one would hear him, where no one would ask questions, and where people in positions of absolute power made sure he understood the cost of knowing what he knew. He was held. He was beaten. He was tortured for weeks. And when they finally released him, the message was not subtle and was not open to interpretation. What you found in that tunnel was never yours. It was never going to be. And if you were smart, you would spend the rest of your life pretending you never found it at all. We think of Yamashita's gold as a myth. A story for treasure hunters and conspiracy theorists and old men in mountain towns with too much time and not enough sense. A legend. One of those things that people talk about in the same tone they use for buried pirate ships and lost Aztec temples. Romantic and distant and safely fictional. But for Rogelio Roxas, it was not a myth. It was a real tunnel, a real Buddha, real gold bars stacked in the dark beneath real Philippine soil. And the men who came through his door at 2 in the morning were real men in the employ of real power, doing real and documented violence to protect something that very powerful people needed the rest of the world to keep believing was not real. Yamashita's gold destroyed Rogelio Roxas. And he was not the first. He was not the last. He was simply the one who refused to disappear quietly, and that refusal changed everything. To understand why that gold was under the mountains of Benguet, you have to go back to 1944. Japan is losing the war and everyone in the imperial command structure knows it. 4 years, methodically, systematically, on a scale that the world would not fully comprehend until decades later, Japan had been stripping Asia of its wealth. Gold from China. Platinum from Manchuria. Diamonds, ancient artifacts, looted currency, centuries of accumulated national treasure from a dozen conquered nations, all of it funneled into a covert imperial operation codenamed Golden Lily. The operation was overseen directly by members of the imperial family and represented one of the largest organized looting campaigns in the history of human warfare. By 1944, the Philippines had become the final holding point for all of it. A temporary vault for wealth so enormous that the people managing it could not always accurately account for everything they were moving. The treasure was real. The scale of it was staggering. And America was closing in fast. American submarines were devastating Japanese shipping across the Pacific. Every route back to Tokyo was effectively closed. The gold could not be moved. And so General Yamashita Tomoyuki, the Tiger of Malaya, the commanding officer of Japanese forces in the Philippines, was given an order that would shape Philippine history for the next 80 years. Bury it. All of it. The operation that followed involved the construction of 175 separate tunnel complexes dug into mountains and hillsides across the Philippine archipelago, from the mountain provinces of Luzon to the islands of the Visayas, an underground network of vaults more extensive than anything built in the region before or since. Filipino laborers and prisoners of war were put to work with picks and shovels, digging chambers large enough to hold mountains of gold, booby-trapping the entrances, sealing the inner passages. The work was exhausting, dangerous, and performed by men who had no way of knowing that finishing the job was going to be the last thing they ever did. When the tunnels were finished, when every chamber was packed, every trap was set, every passage was sealed, the engineers and laborers who built them were gathered together for a party. A farewell party. Food was brought in. Drinks were poured. The men who had spent months underground carving the vaults of an empire's stolen wealth sat down together inside those same tunnels and were given one final meal. Then the entrances were dynamited shut from the outside. Every man inside was buried alive with the treasure they had spent their labor creating. The first victims of Yamashita's gold were not treasure hunters. They were not greedy men who reached for something that wasn't theirs. They were laborers and prisoners who dug because they had no choice, and who died because they knew too much. And the logic of that, the cold, precise, imperial logic of eliminating everyone who understood what was hidden and where, did not end in 1945. It simply changed uniforms. After the war ended and Japan surrendered, the maps of the tunnel complexes disappeared. Some say they were destroyed. Some say they were handed to American intelligence officers who understood exactly what they were looking at. Some say they are still somewhere, filed in a basement in Washington under a classification level that has never been lifted. But the rumors did not disappear with the maps. The rumors spread in every direction, through the mountain provinces, through the lowland towns, across the archipelago. By the 1950s and 1960s, treasure hunting had become something close to a mass movement in the Philippines. Ordinary Filipinos, farmers, tradesmen, teachers, veterans, sold their carabao and their land and everything they owned to buy dynamite, rope, and water pumps. They quit their jobs. They abandoned their families. They moved to the mountains and they started digging because the math seemed to make sense. The gold was real, the maps were lost, and the person who found the right tunnel first would become the wealthiest person in Southeast Asia overnight. But the tunnels were not simply holes in the ground full of gold waiting for the right person to arrive with a shovel. They were engineered death traps designed specifically to kill anyone who entered without the original maps and the precise sequence of disarm codes. The Japanese engineers who built them had decades of military experience constructing defensive fortifications, and they applied all of that knowledge to making the vaults impossible to reach alive. Pressure plates connected to 1,000-pound bombs buried in the floor. False walls that gave way into deep water chambers designed to flood instantly, trapping anyone inside. Passages deliberately constructed to look like the correct route, but leading instead to sealed rooms filled with poison gas that had been sitting undisturbed since 1945. Some treasure hunters who managed to get deep enough into a tunnel found themselves suddenly underwater in total darkness with no way to determine which direction was up. The tunnels did not care how determined you were. They did not care how desperate you were. They were built to kill, and they did, consistently, for decades. In the mid-1980s, a group of 7 men from a small town in Nueva Vizcaya pooled everything they had, savings, borrowed money, a truck they sold a week before they left, and went into the mountains following a map that an old Japanese veteran had sold them in a bar in Manila. They were not reckless. They were experienced local diggers who had been working treasure sites for years and knew the risks as well as anyone. They told their families they would be back in 2 weeks. They left detailed notes about where they were going and which tunnel entrance they planned to use. They were never seen again. No bodies were ever recovered. The authorities who investigated, such as the investigation was, concluded that a tunnel collapse was the most probable explanation, which may be true, or may be the kind of explanation that gets written when the alternative explanations are more complicated than anyone in an official position wants to deal with. 7 men. Gone. The mountain gave nothing back. Rogelio Roxas survived the torture. He survived the years of intimidation and harassment and the systematic campaign to discredit him as a fraud and a liar and a desperate man chasing a fantasy. He survived all of it. And then he did something that nobody with any knowledge of what he was up against could have reasonably expected. He did not hide, and he did not stay quiet. He sued Ferdinand Marcos. In a United States federal court in Hawaii, Rogelio Roxas filed suit against the Marcos estate, presenting testimony and evidence about the Golden Buddha, the gold bars, the armed men who came through his door at 2 in the morning, and the weeks of torture that followed. The suit wound its way through the American legal system for years, while Marcos died in 1989 Honolulu exile and his estate fought every motion. And in 1996, after years of documented evidence and testimony, a U.S. federal court did something that permanently closed the door on anyone who wanted to keep calling Yamashita's gold a myth. They ruled in Rogelio Roxas's favor. $22 billion. That was the figure the court awarded Rogelio Roxas in damages from the Marcos estate. $22 billion, a number that does not exist in the realm of personal injury suits or property disputes. A number that only makes sense if the gold was real, the theft was real, And the scale of what was taken was precisely as enormous as Roxas had been saying for 25 years, while the powerful people who took it called him a liar. The judgment was one of the largest ever entered in an American court. The judge's ruling confirmed the existence of the Golden Buddha. It confirmed the theft. It confirmed the torture. In the cold, evidentiary language of a federal court proceeding, not rumor, not legend, not the claim of a treasure hunter with nothing to show for his trouble, Yamashita's gold was ruled to be real. The treasure existed. The crime was proven. The verdict was entered into the legal record of the United States of America and has never been overturned. $22 billion for one locksmith from Baguio who found the wrong tunnel. Rogelio Roxas died on the eve of that trial. Not after the verdict. Not after seeing the judgment entered. Not after a single cent of that $22 billion had moved in any direction toward any person his family could name. He died in May 1993, before the proceedings concluded, in circumstances that the people who loved him did not find satisfying and that the official record did not investigate with the kind of thoroughness the situation arguably deserved. He never saw the verdict. He never saw his name cleared in open court. He never held a single peso of what the law eventually said was owed to him. The court proved the gold existed. The court proved it was stolen. The court proved that Rogelio Roxas told the truth from the first day he opened his mouth until the last day of his life. And Rogelio Roxas died with nothing, which is the most complete and most honest summary of what it has always meant, in the entire recorded history of this story, to be the person who actually finds the treasure. Today, people are still digging. Right now, somewhere in the mountain provinces of Luzon, someone is in a tunnel following a map they paid too much for, chasing a story that has already swallowed more lives than it has rewarded. And here is the thing, the question was never really whether the gold is there. A U.S. federal court already answered that question in 1996. The gold is real. The question, the only question that has ever actually mattered, is whether it is worth it. Every man who entered a mountain and did not come out had the same answer on the way in. Roxas had the same answer in 1971. They were all certain. They were all, in the ways that mattered to them, right? And the mountain is still there, and the tunnels are still sealed, and somewhere beneath the soil of this country is a weight of stolen wealth that has been killing the people who look for it since before most of the people watching this were born. If this story stayed with you, if this is the kind of hidden history that makes you want to go deeper, then our episode on the Kingdom Spain erased from Philippine history is waiting for you right now. The treasure was real. The cost was realer. Watch next, the billion-dollar Kingdom Spain erased from history. Subscribe to the Filipino narrative, the history they didn't put in your textbooks.